A tale, let it be told. On a Wednesday that wore Monday's boots, the ceiling fan in courtroom 2 wobbled like a politician's promise. A boy in a school sweater, frayed elbows, badge darned on by a mother who believes in threat, stood at the bar holding a notebook the color of rain just before it gives up. The senior advocate in a robe polished by victories turned chin high and let disdain dress itself as humor. "Your lordship," he said, eyes sliding over the boy the way oil slides off water. The pupil wishes to teach us arithmetic. Perhaps he will first finish his homework." Laughter wandered the pews looking for a place to sit. The boy didn't redden. He didn't shrink. He turned a page and spoke with the gentleness reserved for elders and brand new engines. "With respect," he said, "the homework is the court's. A sum is wrong. If we carry the one properly, a fisherman goes home instead of to jail." The talking drum disguised as a scarred gavel block cleared its throat. "Watch the road. Watch the boy. Watch the number that will turn a room into a river." Last market day, the city swore in its first youth data fellow. A pilot role no one asked for until the power cut during sentencing, and someone had to explain by candlelight why numbers must be honest. The fellow's name was Talia Coomson, 16, captain of the math club, volunteer at the library's dusty computer room, son of a seamstress whose tape measure has measured more men into humility than cloth into suits. What most people didn't know, Talia had built a small program on a second-hand laptop to audit court fine scale against the schedule stacked in a binder that smelled faintly of old rain. He called it kite. Yeah, because truth should fly, but remain tethered. The binder was asleep when his case 68, a fisherman accused of selling a bucket of snapper without a license, came to court. The lawyer wore confidence like perfume. The judge wore patience like a scarf. The boy wore numbers in his mouth like hymns. The room would learn what happens when arrogance teases arithmetic. It gets corrected publicly. If this tale passes your courthouse, let it leave footprints. Like to keep the drum loud. Share with someone who has been called boy when carrying a ledger, and comment with your city plus time. So the next part finds your bench before pride adjourns it. Listener, bring your ears as one brings a stool to an elder's fire. The Amanfro Circuit Court is an old dog that learned new tricks slowly. Its pillars know secrets. Its clerk, Abigail, can coax a jammed printer into confession with a look. Its bailiff, Yaw, has a whistle that believes itself to be law. And presiding this Wednesday, Justice Ajay Arma, a man who keeps his spectacles in a case that once carried his mother's hymnal. On the docket, case 63, Republic vs. Kofi Ananase, fisherman of Vanu Fosu, charged with selling fish without a retail permit. Second count, uttering insults when asked to produce same. Translation, a man who knows ties argued with a man who knows stamps. The senior advocate, Council Mensima, represented the municipality in all matters, small enough for their pride but big enough for people's bread. He entered with a file fat from being fed rather than exercised. Simple matter, he told the judge. We asked for the statutory fine in our account. The schedule says weighing class C, minimum will 1,000 ray, maximum 2,000 lakes. We recommend me a 1,800 nails to teach the coastal markets that policy does not sleep in hammocks. The fisherman stood, hat in hand. He had a face like a map that had been folded, unfolded, and rained on. His hands smelled of mornings. The public defender, Arabateta, leaned close, whispering patience. She had argued 1,000 small storms back into weather. "Any representations?" the judge asked. Araba rose. "Yes, your lordship. The accused is a first-time offender. He tried to obtain the permit, but the municipal desk was closed for a funeral, twice. He has 4 children and owes the net repair. We asked for a caution, community service, clean the fish landing, teach younger fishers safety." Councilman Sema shrugged, a gesture that loves itself. "Your lordship, if we let the sea negotiate penalties, the sea will win." He flipped the Sheen fine schedule, jabbed a manicured finger. Class C, page 47. Talia shifted at the back. A student on midterm break wearing his school's blue sweater despite the heat because uniforms are coats of belonging. In his lap sat Kite, which is to say a notebook with columns drawn by hand because not every program needs a screen. He had spent nights copying the entire fine schedule into tables, adding notes where new amendments were stuck to old pages with cheap glue and prayer. Page 47 had once been Class C, until an amendment pushed the classes down by 1 and then forgot to update the index. In the margin of his notebook, he had written in pencil, 37, B after 2021 AMDT. When the judge said, very well, and reached for the pen, Tawia's stomach did the mathematics of disaster. He stood before he could be taught not to. Your lordship, he said, voice steady the way boats are steady because they accept waves. I seek leave of the court to raise a numerical concern. Counsel Mensima turned slowly, a cat noticing a broom. Your lordship, he said, the gallery does not address the bench. This is a court, not a classroom. The gallery tittered because courts are both and we pretend otherwise to sell dignity at a markup. The judge, to his credit, let curiosity rent a chair. Who are you? Tawia Kumson, he answered bowing. Volunteer with the Library Legal Literacy Club. I helped the court during last month's power outage to tally fine receipts when the machine lost its manners. Abigail, the clerk, verified with a nod small as a coin. He did, she murmured. He can count when the printer sulks. Counsel Mensima rolled his eyes with professional grace. Your lordship, if we open the door to schoolboys with calculators, next we will have fishermen arguing from the tide tables. Perhaps the tide should be heard in a fishing case, the judge said dryly. Mr. Coomson, say what you must in 1 minute, eh? 1 minute is enough if the point is a dot, Tawe replied, and a couple of police officers hid their smiles. He lifted his notebook. The Sedirav fine schedule cited is outdated by index. The page number points to Class C, but the Shro 2021 amendment reclassified retail permit violations to Class B with a maximum of 200 toll and a minimum of 400. Ivan introduced alternative sanctions, a community service, and laid compliance orders. The binder's index was not updated. The municipality uses the index, not the table. He slid a photocopy forward, his own, authenticated last week by the High Court Registrar for a school project. The stamp winked official in the fluorescent light. The senior advocate peered and sneered. Your lordship, with respect, we cannot rely on no school projects. The judge adjusted his spectacles. Clark! Abigail produced the binder. The pages sighed. She flipped, frowned. Index points to page 47 for C, but the table shows who after the fold. She checked the amendment tucked in a plastic sleeve, its corners chewed by time. Amendment 2021-3 reclassifies retail permit low to B. Yaw, the bailiff, blew his whistle softly without blowing, a habit of relief. Counsel Mensima regrouped. Even if B, the maximum is 1/200, we can still teach a lesson. Respectfully, Talia said, lessons must be priced correctly. Otherwise, they become extortion or with grammar. The room hummed. The judge did not scold. He seemed to be measuring the boy's verbs by weight, not by noise. Your lordship, Araba added, seizing the opening like a fisherman who knows when net meets school, also allows alternative sanctions. My client's offense grew from its closed desk, not criminal appetite, order, compliance, and service. Let him teach kids to mend nets and register at dawn when the clerk is there. Counsel Mensima leaned on his favorite prop, tone. We must deter the market. If everyone cites funerals, we will have weddings for excuses. Tawia lifted a small graph. He had drawn with ruler and stubbornness. Bars rose and fell like a patient heartbeat. I audited the last 6 months of fines for retail cases. He said, average fine assessed, 1,700 as if still. Class C, default rate, 41%. People don't pay what they can't, so they go to jail 2 days each to purge fines they never could have afforded. But where we use the community service ted, default dropped to 4% at all. Markets got a cleaner, and the revenue from your permit renewals rose because fear was removed from the desk. He passed copies to both tables, not like a boy begging attention, like a clerk feeding a machine that had finally asked for the right paper. Silence grew a chair. Even the fan stopped wobbling to listen. The judge cleared his throat. Counsel, he said softly to Menzima, it appears our indexio owes the court an apology. The advocate recovered with the speed of professionals whose pride is elastic. If the court pleases, we submit to Class B now on alternative sanction, provided the accused performs service where the public sees deterrence. Arba smiled without teeth. Where the public sees usefulness, she corrected. The judge nodded. So ordered. Class B recognize compliance within 14 days, 20 hours of community service at the fish landing, an apology to the municipal desk for unhelpful words, and an apology from the municipality to the accused for closing their window at the wrong hour. He looked at the boy. And the court thanks Mr. Coomson for his vigilance. The gallery exhaled. The fisherman bowed, hat clutched like a rescued friend. God bless Numbers, he said, and Numbers accepted the compliment with their usual shyness. The senior advocate wasn't done performing. He turned, offered the boy a smile that could slice yam. Well done, pupil, he said. But remember, this is a court of law, not a pretty mass club. Law is counting in public, Tawiah replied, gathering his papers. We count wrongs, rights, days, fines, freedoms, and carry them properly. He bowed, not to the man, to the bench. Counsel Menzima snorted. The sound traveled poorly. Your lordship, perhaps the boy will join counsel one day when he's old enough to know the taste of losing. The drum in the gavel block muttered, hush! He is already the counsel to something you've forgotten to consult. As people filed out, the judge called, Mr. Coomson, a word in the chambers. Counsel Menzima followed uninvited, as men of habit do. The clerk closed the door with a politeness that contains warning. Chambers smelled of tea and old paper. On the wall hung a photo of the judge's mother, eyes the color of rules that keep their promises. The judge gestured to a chair. You said kite? Yes, your lordship. A small program. But today I brought this paper seal version in case the power decides to remember its village. Who taught you to see what the index hid? My, mother. Said Tawiah simply. She's a seamstress. When fabric is cut wrong by an old pattern, she corrects the pattern, not the cloth. He paused. Also, Madam Abena, at the library, who lets me sit against the server when the permit's computer pretends to be tired. Counsel Menzima fidgeted with his cufflinks. With respect, he said, meaning with difficulty. What is your rank, boy? Who made you auditor of our binder? Tawiah pulled a folded letter from his pocket, not as a sword, as a key. I am the city's youth data fellow, a trial roll through the mayor's office, and the registrar. Unpaid. My brief is to test whether we can keep simple math honest where it burns bread. He handed over the letter. The seal did not perform. It existed. The judge read, set the letter down, and let his hand rest on it the way one rests a palm on a sleeping child. Counsel, he said to Menzima without looking up. It appears our schoolboy holds a idol we might all respect. A silence fell that wasn't defeat. Only the space pride needs to switch chairs. Your lordship, said Tawiah, the court does not need me. It needs a bench that listens to she numbers the way it listens to their names. Allow me to build you one, not furniture, procedure. The judge smiled like rain in a dry month. Build, he said. Bring me a bench that can carry cool figures without splintering. The drum in the gavel block tapped once, agreeing to host a new cousin. A tale. Let it be told. Afternoon taught the courthouse to sweat and complete sentences. By 3, the phone bench of numbers existed, not as wood, not yet, but as a paper skeleton with a heart that insisted on verbs. Clerk Abigail cleared a corner of the registry, rolled in a table, and borrowed the notice board that had been mouthing forgotten deadlines for a year. Bailiff Yor brought chalk and an attitude that, for once, respected chalk. Justice Ajay Arma shed his robe and wore his shirt like a reasonable man. Mr. Fellow, he said to Tawiah, propose! 4 boats, said the boy, as if he were reassembling a stubborn engine. He wrote in careful block letters the court could not misunderstand. The 4 boats of counting fair. N1. Index the index. Verify the page references against the latest amendment before citing a class. Post a corrected map. 2. Quote the range. When a fine is proposed, say the minimum and maximum flame aloud. Numbers behave better with their families listening. 3. Record the reason. State the why note for the number chosen. First offense, closed desk, community impact. File it with a sentence like a receipt. 4. Offer the alternative. If the schedule allows the service with or kitty compliance, the court must say, well, before choosing money. He added a 5th lower than the others, the way people add a footnote when the foot is the point. 5. Publish the pattern. Monthly, the clerk posts a simple chart. Fines by class, service assigned, default rate, jail days imposed for non-payment. The public name reads, chart, the court adjusts. Mensima folded his arms, learned the posture of salt. We are not a market stall to post prices, he murmured, low enough to be brave and polite enough to be employed. Exactly, said Hope Public Defender Tedder, who had joined with a mug of tea and a grin that accepted no nonsense. Markets disclose prices. The poor at least know what they are not buying. Courts hide prices and call it discretion. Boat 5 makes our discretion earn its keep. Justice Ajay Arma nodded. We will pilot. Clark? Abigail's pen made promises with speed. I will draft a practice note. And, she said, and staple it to the docket until it learns to walk alone. Within an hour, I see the yellow tape made from marked a modest rectangle near the back wall. Name public ledger. On it, Abigail pinned the corrected index, page numbers recalculated, classes aligned. She added a handwritten sign. If your page number points to yesterday, ask for today. Yaw snorted, which was his way of approving literature. At 4, court reconvened. The judge announced the pilot with the tone of a man who has decided to be stubborn on behalf of something useful. From this day, he said, we will index, quote, record, offer, publish. We will accuse page numbers of lying before we accuse people. Case after small case learned to wear its numbers properly. A woman fined for baking bread by the roadside. A Class A nuisance now properly addressed with the sweeping duty at dawn. A Trotro driver fined for obstructing traffic. Class B with traffic park assistance instead of cash that would have been stolen later by price of hunger. The air lightened by grams, rooms noticed such things. Between cases, Mensima approached a bench of numbers the way a man approaches a cousin he once ignored. He stood looking at boat 3. Record the reason for longer than necessary. When he finally spoke, his voice had misplaced its armor. Clark, he said, add a line to the form. Alternatives considered. Make it impossible for me to skip. Abigail smiled like a mother who has seen a child eat vegetables without bribery. As the court pleases, she said, which is clerk for amen. Then came case 88, the one Pride had prepared for itself like fufu on a day of fasting. A youth, Akosa, charged with the contempt of court for laughing during a sentencing. The laughter had been the nervous kind that sneaks out of bodies when fear forgets how to sit. The magistrate downstairs had made it an issue. The matter rose on review. Your lordship, began the Mensima, finding his familiar wind. The dignity of the court must be kept like a spouse. True, said Tede. I'm not beaten like one. Snickers rippled. The judge let them reach shore. He turned to Keakosa, a boy with shoes resigned to dust. Why did you laugh? The boy twisted his fingers. Sir, the fan squeaked like a chick on my head. Laughed. He covered his mouth as if to prevent proof. Clark, said the judge. Did the fan squeak? Abigail, who has many jobs including and truth, nodded. It does, your lordship. We have named it known Shadrach because it survives fires. The judge looked back to the whole bench of numbers unconsciously. Boat 3, record the reason. He looked at boat 4, or offer the alternative. State, he said to Mensima, what is your proposed sanction? 2 days. Jail, the advocate replied, then glanced at the bolts as if caught by his own reflection. He cleared his throat. Alternatively, held 1 hour of assisting the trade clerk to post a new index and clean the fan. The judge smiled, small like a man rescuing dignity without stabbing learning. Alternative ordered, he said, clerk, draft a caution. Bailiff, find a ladder. Mr. Akosa, meet no Shadrach. Ken, laughter. Now licit, wash the room. The dignity of the court not only survived, it was loved for a minute, which is rarer than feared for an hour. After sitting, the judge invited feedback, a strange creature courts rarely let in. Market women. Spoke about fines that eat children's note money. Drivers spoke about bribes that pretend to be receipts. Shewa teacher asked for a Saturday session on explaining fines to PTA parents so the roomers would stop charging interest. Y'all asked for a bigger whistle. The judge promised him instead a quieter heart. At dusk, the registrar's messenger brought a memo with an emblem that makes furniture stand straighter. The Chief Justice's office had heard rumor of the bench of numbers. Courts gossip like aunties with important secrets. The memo did not scold. It inquired. Send details, cost, objections encountered, lessons learned. Oh, cost, muttered Abigail, gesturing a paper and a borrowed board. 1 box of pins and a boy's appetite. Objections, said Tete, glancing at Mensima, who was, to his credit, smiling at his own reflection on bolt 3. Fewer by the hour. Lessons, asked the judge, writing with the speed of a man who wants history to find him already accounted for. He wrote, numbers are shapes of mercy when held in the open. Meanwhile, outside it under the almond tree, Tawiya drafted the wood version of the bench with Amadeda, a carpenter whose fingers do math faster than accountants. Back high, seat wide, she said, letters deep so rain cannot smooth them into lies. What shall we carve? She asked, chisel waiting for a sentence that deserved to become furniture. Count before you judge, said Tawiya. And on the arm. And the head. Scales and equal sign, she nodded. Siblings who quarrel less than humans do. The next morning, they carried the bench into a courtroom too, like a canoe into a drought. Hopeful, a little ridiculous, perfect. People gathered as if a new drum had been brought to the festival. The judge stood beside it, palm on wood. This bench punishes no one, he said. It calibrates us. Violators of the 4 bolts, including me, will sit. Citizens who mock will sit. We will not confuse laughter with contempt again without asking why. The first to sit was not a criminal, not a clerk or counsel, Mensima. He sat by choice, robe set aside. I mocked a boy, he said aloud, for the court reporter and the courtroomer alike. I forgot that genius sometimes wears sweater pills. I will sit for 1 hour and draft a form that forces us to record the reason. Then I will walk it to the magistrates as if it were my own idea, which it was not. Yaw's whistle nodded. Abigail's pen smiled. The gallery bowed to a kind of humility it hadn't expected to flirt with in this building. While Mensima sat, Tawiya trained the clerks to us on Kyle, now a simple Google sheet with drop-downs and conditional colors. Because not all justice needs code. It needs columns. They entered yesterday's sentences. Fines, reasons, alternatives offered. The sheet-colored cells, green when a range was quoted, amber when an alternative was missing, Reggie when a page citation didn't match the corrected index. It was not wizardry. It was washing hands. At noon, a delegation of market women entered in their cloths the color of ripeness. They approached the bench, not timid. We wish to pay our debts, said Auntie Faiba, leader of a group that had been paying the police unofficially because fear charges different interest. Not those, she added at Yaw's raised brow. Knowledge, and we wish to know how to avoid fines. The judge laughed. First time anyone offered to pay knowledge in a courthouse. He looked at you, Ted Guess, who already had a plan sprouting behind her eyes. Saturday 9, she said, bring you receipts. We will translate them into habits. By close of day, the courtroom felt lighter. Not because cases vanished, but because guesswork did. Someone had put legs under the table where intuition had once stood wobbling. People left with the sense that sentences had been counted by hands they could see. On his way out, Mensima, stopped by Italia. His hour had shaped his spine slightly. Mr. Coomson, he said, and the mister was not sarcasm. Who taught you your mouth? My mother, said the boy. When she sews, she bites thread to cut it. She said, bite exactly where you should. Do not spoil the cloth with your teeth. Mensima nodded. Today you bit exactly. Thank you for sparing the cloth. He left. The judge stood by the new bench alone for a moment, ran his finger along, count before you judge, and whispered to the wood, remind me when I forget. The bench promised in the language furniture uses, staying, a tale, let it be told. And 2 weeks later, the court held a small festival that pretended to be an administrative exercise. Open Numbers Day. The registry set up tables under blue canopies. Clerk Abigail printed charts that looked like confetti learned discipline. Bailiff Yaw stood beside a poster of the 4 boats and told anyone who would listen that he was now a boat supervisor, which is not a real title but sounded like courage. Public Defender Tedder set a booth labeled Translate Your Ticket. Children traced the carved letters on the bound bench of numbers with their fingers. Wood absorbed hope like oil. News travels faster than paper. Reporters came, one carrying a camera like a small suspicious goat. Bloggers came with captions already loaded. Head the mayor's office sent a liaison who was not annoyed for once. And with them, drawn by the scent of relevance, came Counsel Mensima, robe crisp, expression softened to curious. He had brought a younger associate, Mephis, to show her that the law can be a place of revision, not just rehearsal. The program was simple. Abigail presented the first month's listening ledger, cases by class, range quoted or not, alternatives offered. The chart did not scold, it told. Fiend default on fines had dropped from 39% to 12% LA. Community service assignments had tripled. The jail had one empty cell and discovered it could breathe. When she finished, a small hush paid her. She smiled shyly as if the paper had dressed itself. Then came a surprise, a brown envelope from the registrar of the appeals court. Our case, Amanfro vs. Boateng, had been appealed on grounds that the fine imposed was below the statutory minimum. Someone upstairs had glanced at the index nail, not the schwa table. Old habits root deep. Some weeds require community, not just a hoe. The court chose not to flinch. We will teach up, said Justice Ajayarma, and the gallery, which generally mistrusts anything that climbs, approved the choice of verb. They convened until open session sale under the canopy. Papers, microphones, a good pen. Counsel Mensima offered to argue for the court's own sentence against his own former reflex, which is a better miracle than statues bleeding. Your lordship, he said, we will prepare a record of counting. Corrected index, amendment, range quoted, reason recorded, alternative offered. We will enclose the bench of numbers meal process as an annex. Spell enclose how you like. I hate that artist. Just send it. The boy, Talia, stood and lifted the Qaeda ledger, now printed clean. He walked the court through it gently, not as a boy showing elders their own gate, but as a neighbor pointing out where the path floods and where it holds. He ended with a sentence that grew wings as it left his mouth. When we publish our arithmetic, even our enemies do our sums for us. Under the almond tree, a few old men who came mostly for shade spoke among themselves. This boy, one said, has his mother's needle in his tongue. Another nodded. And the judge? He has stopped using the gavel like a hammer and started using it like a drum. In the afternoon, the appeals registrar called. Loudspeaker, no secrets. We have received your record of counting, she said. The panel thanks you. It appears the lower court did not sin. The index did. We adopt count before you judge as a recommendation for circuits. Also, kindly ship us your benchmark design. Wood that carries figures may yet carry figures. Laughter performed the exact function of joy. It made more space inside people's ribs for mercy. Then, because reality has a way of auditioning new difficulties when cameras are fed, a police van pulled up. 2 officers guided an elderly woman, Aso Adepa, market moneylender, toward the steps. Charge, operating without license, usurious interest. Her face wore the mapped calm of women who have balanced ledgers and babies with the same palm. The gallery muttered. Half had borrowed from her. The other half had cursed her rates. In open air court, the case proceeded. Mensima, prosecuted with uncharacteristic tenderness because he had once seen his mother borrow 3 days of rice from a woman like this. Teta, defended without sanctifying debt. The schedule for money lending had its own glass den with fierce teeth. The index, thankfully, was now honest, but the alternatives allowed repayment plan orders and financial literacy service. Your lordship, said Seta. Finest woman, yes, but also require a community workshop where she teaches record keeping under supervision. Some usury is ignorance, not malice. Some is greed, countered Mensima gently. Order caps on her rates. The judge turned to the bench of numbers and laid his palm on count before you judge, as if reading Braille. He quoted the range. He recorded the reason. He offered the alternative. He then did something most courts forget they can. Here's the woman. Aso Adepa, he said. How did you price your loans? By sphere? She answered promptly. The court didn't flinch. Not my fear. Look, I charged what would make them return fast. I learned it from a man who learned it from hunger. She looked at the carved letters. I can learn another math. Nada. The sentence wrote itself. Fine within D, the repayment plan order for her worst contracts and a monthly market class of teaching. Books what instead of rumors, the market applauded with the same hands it uses to weigh tomatoes. Numbers had done their work without leaving bruises. As the sun began to bargain with evening, the program reached its small climax. The Chief Justice's liaison arrived. No sirens, just sandals, with a flat parcel and a grin. For, Mr. Tauya Kumson, she announced, who made a room listen to arithmetic or ego until pride paid attention. She handed him a cool writ of thanks. Rare as rain in Harmattan, for building the cheat or bench of numbers, for the courage to be precise, for turning the mass into mercy. The crowd cheered the way towns cheer when a borehole finally gives water without complaining about the taste. Counsel Mensima stepped forward, not as performer, as citizen. He stood straight, removed his robe, folded it over his arm, and raised his right hand in a civic salute. Palm open, fingers unarmed. Mr. Kumson, he said, voice softer than day one. I mocked a teen oil in court. The genius revealed silenced me. I salute your real title. Echo stag keeper of the figures. May my arguments learn your arithmetic. Phones rose, not as weapons, as witnesses. The picture would travel further than memos. The lesson would travel inside lunchtime gossip, which is sturdier than policy. Later, while canopies were being bullied by a playful wind and children begged to sit just one more time on the bench, Abigail found Tawiya beside the ledger, staring at the green cells like constellations. What are you counting now? She asked. Minutes, he said. How long it took to pull one fisherman away from jail with a pencil. How long it takes to teach a court to carry the one. He looked at the bench. How long benches last when carved with truth. Wood last, she said, patting the backrest. People, we must keep Edwesu oiling the. She handed him a small envelope, a bus pass loaded for the year. From the clerks, she said, so you don't have to walk your math name to court. He tried to refuse with the decorum of youth who know gratitude is not begging. She closed his hand. Take, she said. Even calculators need batteries. The judge, standing off to the side, watched the boy, watched the bench, watched the numbers pinned to the board. He thought of his mother's hymnal in the spectacles case. He thought of a younger version of himself who once believed that mercy was soft and math was hard. He smiled at the truth that had rearranged itself. Mercy is hard. Math is soft when well held. Evening took the court gently by the elbow. The sit-down bench of numbers kept the last light like a secret it intended to share in the morning. Y'all locked the doors with a flourish so unnecessary it was almost a dance. Abigail had switched off the copier as one blesses a faithful donkey. Tedder gathered leftover forms and put them where the hungry could eat them tomorrow, on the notice board. On the steps, Councilman Simmer stopped Tawia one last time. "Teach me your kite," he said, half embarrassed, half liberated. "I wish to fly it in my chambers, sir." The boy grinned, all teeth, no triumph. "Tomorrow," he said, "bring a notebook. We will draw columns. We will carry the one together." They parted. The drum in the gavel block stranded inside somehow heard the conversation outside and tapped 3 times. Paper exhaled. Wood remembered. Numbers tucked themselves into the court's pockets like talismans. A tale. A tale. Let it be told. The telling is finished. The counting will continue the work. If you reached here, leave your footprint for the drum. So the bench stays oiled. Share with someone who handles fines and comment your city plus time. So the next folktale finds your court before the next index lies.